Mafia bosses and adult film stars have always shared a mysterious bond. Pablo Escobar, the cocaine king himself, had a fiery romance with Virginia Vallejo, who later betrayed him in ways no one saw coming. Johnny Stompanato, the ex-Marine turned mob enforcer, got tangled up with Lana Turner, but their love story ended with him dead. And Sam Giancana, the feared Chicago boss, had his own twisted thing with Phyllis McGuire. We'll get into the details, but first, let's begin with the Mafia boss who dated the most famous adult film star, Johnny Stompanato. This guy had a taste for bloodshed, money, and beautiful women. Stompanato didn't just date Hollywood actresses, he controlled them. But when he met Lana Turner, the gorgeous star of adult films like The Postman Always Rings Twice and Peyton Place, he found a woman who wouldn't be controlled so easily. Their love story was fierce, violent, and in the end, deadly. Johnny was born in 1925 in Illinois. He joined the U.S. Marines and served in World War II, but when the war ended, he didn't return to a normal life. Instead, he drifted into the Los Angeles underworld, where money and fear ruled everything. When he met Lana, he thought he had found the perfect woman. At first, he spoiled her with gifts and sweet words, but soon his true nature took over. He was jealous, controlling, and violent. When Lana filmed a movie with Sean Connery, Johnny got so mad that he stormed onto the set and pulled a gun on the future James Bond. Big mistake. Connery knocked him out cold. British police sent Johnny back to the U.S., but that wasn't the end of the drama. On April 4th, 1958, things turned deadly. Johnny and Lana were fighting at her home in Beverly Hills. He threatened to kill her. But Lana wasn't alone. Her 14-year-old daughter, Cheryl Crane, heard everything. Afraid for her mother's life, she grabbed a knife and stabbed Johnny in the stomach. He fell to the floor, bleeding out. By the time help arrived, he was dead. The trial ruled it a justifiable homicide, but Hollywood would never forget the scandal. Johnny Stompanato had a wild relationship with Lana Turner, but the next Mafia boss dated a Hollywood actress who later told the world all about him in her book. Mickey Cohen. Mickey Cohen was loud, dangerous, and always in the spotlight. He ran Los Angeles like his personal playground, making millions from illegal gambling and bribing anyone who got in his way. He had the police in his pocket, enemies everywhere, and a love life just as wild as his crimes. One of the women who caught his eye was Liz Renee, a stunning actress famous for adult films like Desperate Living and The Thrill Killers. Liz had a face made for the big screen and a personality built for trouble. She knew how to grab attention, and Mickey loved that about her. He spoiled her with money, jewelry, and a front row seat to the underworld, but dating a mob boss came with risks. The law was watching, the rivals were waiting, and Mickey's temper was never far from exploding. Before he ruled LA, Mickey had been a fighter, literally. He started as a professional boxer in the 1930s, before becoming a bodyguard for the legendary Bugsy Siegel. When Siegel was assassinated in 1947, Mickey stepped in and took control. For years, he made a fortune, but the government was determined to bring him down. In 1951, they got him on tax evasion. He did his time, came out swinging, but was locked up again in 1961. Liz stayed loyal, even refusing to testify against him. She later spilled everything in her 1991 book, My First 2,000 Men. By the time Mickey was released in 1972, his empire was gone. And Liz, she kept living life, proving she was never just a gangster's girl. She was a star in her own right. Mickey Cohen and Liz Renee were all about luxury and trouble, but the next crime boss had a love story so risky, it led to one of the biggest manhunts in history. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman. El Chapo had money, power, and an army of men ready to kill for him. He controlled the drug trade, bribed politicians, and escaped from prison like it was a game. But even with all that, he still wanted more. In 2015, while hiding from authorities, he became fixated on a woman, Kate del Castillo, the Mexican actress famous for her role in the erotic crime series La Reina del Sur. Kate had played a drug queen on screen, and El Chapo saw something in her that fascinated him. He reached out in secret, sending messages through his men, hoping to meet her. She was intrigued, but had no idea she was stepping into a real-life crime story. Through a risky chain of events, they met in a secret location, with actor Sean Penn tagging along. The world didn't know it yet, but that meeting would play a role in El Chapo's downfall. Born in 1957 in Mexico, Guzman started from nothing. As a kid, he sold oranges to survive. As a man, he built the Sinaloa cartel, smuggling billions in. Drugs across borders. He escaped prison twice, once in 2001 in a laundry cart, and again in 2015 through a mile-long tunnel. The escapes made him a legend, but legends don't last forever. In 2016, authorities finally caught him. By 2019, El Chapo was sentenced to life in a U.S. prison. Kate walked away, but her name remained forever tied to the world's most dangerous man. El Chapo's secret meeting with Kate del Castillo became a worldwide scandal, but the next gangster's love life was full of problems too, especially with his actress girlfriend who had her own struggles. Richard Kane. Richard Kane lived two lives. By day, he wore a badge, flashing his credentials as a Chicago police officer. By night, he worked for the mob, taking orders from the infamous Chicago outfit. He knew how to play both sides of the law, but in the end, neither could save him. His love life was just as reckless as his career, and his most infamous romance was with Hollywood star Barbara Payton. If you've heard her name before, you know she starred in adult films like Kiss Tomorrow Goodbye and Bride of the Gorilla. Barbara was once Hollywood's golden girl, blonde, beautiful, and full of promise. But fame was fleeting, and addiction soon took over her life. She found herself in a toxic spiral of booze, bad decisions, and violent relationships. When she met Kane, they were both on a downward path. Their relationship was fueled by passion and substance abuse, a dangerous combination that only made things worse. Kane wasn't just any dirty cop. He worked closely with mob boss Sam Giancana, handling intelligence and even training with the CIA for secret anti-Castro operations. But power in the underworld never lasts. On December 20th, 1973, Kane walked into a sandwich shop in Chicago, unaware that his time was up. Two gunmen entered, shot him twice in the head, and left him slumped on the floor. The message was clear. He had outlived his usefulness. Barbara's career had already crumbled, and Kane was gone. In the end, both of them were victims of the fast life they couldn't escape. Richard Kane and Barbara Payton had a messy relationship, but the next gangster didn't just date an actress. He used his criminal power to mess up her career. Abu Salam. Abu Salam's name was feared in the Mumbai underworld. He had built his power through extortion, contract killings, and smuggling, working under India's most dangerous gangster, Dawood Ibrahim. But despite the blood on his hands, he had a weakness: Bollywood glamour. That's how he ended up with Monica Bedi, an actress known for adult films like Yanam Samja Karo. Monica wanted fame, and Salem had the connections to make that happen. With his influence, she landed roles and invitations to high-profile events. But there was a cost. Salem was not just a man in love. He was a man who controlled everything. Their relationship was built on promises, protection, and fear. Salem's crimes finally caught up with him. In 1993, he played a key role in the Mumbai bombings, a devastating attack that left over 250 people dead. The police were after him, and he had no choice but to run. He fled to Portugal, taking Monica with him. For a while, they lived in luxury, but it was only a matter of time before the law caught up. In 2002, Salem was arrested. Monica claimed she had been misled, but her name was already tied to the scandal. In 2005, Salem was extradited to India and sentenced to life in prison. Monica walked free, but her career was never the same. Salem had given her a taste of fame, but in the end, all he brought was destruction. Abu Salam helped Monica Bedi get famous, but the next gangster dated one of Hollywood's most iconic women, someone who was just as famous as he was dangerous: John "Handsome Johnny" Roselli. John Roselli lived in two worlds. In one, he was a smooth-talking Hollywood insider, mingling with the biggest stars. In the other, he was a trusted enforcer for the Chicago outfit, sent to Los Angeles in the 1930s to take control of the film industry's unions. He knew everyone who mattered, from studio bosses to senators, but one of his most famous connections was with Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn was Hollywood's biggest sex symbol, known for erotic films like Niagara and The 7-Year Itch. Men adored her, and powerful men wanted to own her. Roselli brought her into the mob circle, introducing her to dangerous people, including political figures. Some believe he played a role in her introduction to John F. Kennedy and his brother Robert. Others whisper that he knew what really happened in the days leading up to her mysterious death. While Hollywood saw him as a charming gentleman, Roselli was involved in far more dangerous things. In the early 1960s, he worked with the CIA in failed plots to assassinate Fidel Castro. Poison, explosives, nothing worked. The mob didn't forget, and neither did the government. By 1976, Roselli had outlived his usefulness. One day he vanished. Weeks later, his body was found stuffed inside an oil drum floating in Biscayne Bay, Florida. Someone had made sure he stayed silent forever. His death, like Marilyn's, left more questions than answers. Roselli's romance with Marilyn Monroe was the stuff of legends, but the next mob boss kept his love life more secret, even though his actress girlfriend was a big name: Carlos Marcello. Carlos Marcello didn't crave the spotlight like other mobsters. He ruled with quiet power, pulling strings from the shadows. From the 1940s to the 1980s, he controlled the New Orleans crime family, making millions through racketeering and bribery. Politicians, law enforcement, and businessmen all knew one thing: if you wanted to operate in his city, you played by his rules. But while he kept his business dealings low profile, he was just as private when it came to his love life. One of the few women linked to him was Marilyn Maxwell, a Hollywood actress known for adult films like Champion. Unlike Unlike other actresses who flaunted their mob connections, Marilyn kept her romance with Marcello quiet. Whether out of fear or respect, she understood the kind of man she was dealing with. Marcello's empire was nearly untouchable, but in 1961, the U.S. government made a bold move. He was deported to Guatemala, the country they claimed he was born in, but Marcello wasn't a man who took orders. That same year, he found his way back into the U.S., slipping past authorities as if nothing had happened. Rumors followed him for decades. Some believed he helped finance the assassination of John F. Kennedy, angry over the administration's crackdown on organized crime, but no evidence ever proved it. Marcello stayed in power for years, avoiding the downfall that so many other mobsters faced. His name may not have been loud, but his influence was felt in every corner of the underworld. Carlos Marcello and Marilyn Maxwell were a quiet pair, but the next gangster, he was all about expensive gifts and secret affairs with Hollywood stars. Frank Costello. Frank Costello lived in a world where power was everything. He controlled gambling empires, bribed politicians, and turned the Mafia into something more than just street crime. He was polished, respected, and called the Prime Minister of the Underworld. But even a man like him had his weaknesses, and one of them was June Allison, the Hollywood actress famous for adult films like The Shrike. June had a clean-cut image, but her personal life was more complicated. Costello was older, powerful, and generous. He spoiled her with lavish gifts, making sure she had everything she wanted. Their affair was kept quiet, whispered about only in the circles that mattered. Costello didn't need unnecessary attention. His enemies were already watching him closely. By the 1940s, he had risen to the top of the Louisiana crime family, running gambling operations across the country. Unlike the violent bosses before him, he used connections instead of bullets. Judges, senators, and businessmen all owed him favors. But in the underworld, no one stays safe forever. In 1957, Vito Genovese decided Costello was in the way. A gunman was sent to kill him, and a bullet grazed his head. He survived, but he understood the message. Instead of fighting for his throne, he stepped down. While others ended up in prison or dead in the streets, Costello chose a different ending. He retired, kept his fortune, and lived comfortably until his death in 1973. A rare ending for a man who once ran the underworld. Frank Costello spoiled June Allison with money and presents, but the next crime boss had a girlfriend whose death is still a mystery to this day. Meyer Lansky. Meyer Lansky never needed a gun to be feared. While other mobsters made their names through violence, he built an empire with numbers, turning the Mafia into a billion-dollar business. He was the mastermind behind organized crime's financial system, controlling money that flowed through casinos, racetracks, and international smuggling rings. But for all his careful planning, there was one thing even he couldn't control: love. One of the women linked to him was Thelma Todd, a Hollywood actress known for her roles in erotic films like Monkey Business. She was beautiful, successful, and full of life, but her career came with dangers. She ran in circles that overlapped with the underworld, and her relationships often put her in the middle of powerful, dangerous men. By the 1930s, Lansky had already co-founded the National Crime Syndicate, working behind the scenes to expand the mob's influence. He never made flashy moves, always staying out of the public eye while controlling the Mafia's finances. But Thelma's world was different. Hollywood thrived on attention. Their connection was whispered about, but it was her shocking death that made headlines. In 1935, she was found dead in her car from carbon monoxide poisoning. Officially ruled an accident, rumors swirled about mob involvement. Unlike most crime bosses, Lansky was never convicted of a major crime. He built Las Vegas into a gambling empire, avoided prison, and died peacefully in 1983. Lansky's story proved one thing: sometimes the most dangerous men never pull the trigger. Meyer Lansky's time with Thelma Todd ended in tragedy, but the next mobster played it smart. He kept his actress girlfriend close, but out of sight. Anthony Tony Ducks Corallo. Anthony Tony Ducks Corallo built his empire in the shadows. He ran the Lucchese crime family with quiet authority, controlling labor unions and pulling the strings of New York's construction industry. He didn't make headlines with flashy violence. He made them with power moves that left his rivals with nothing. But away from the mob, he had another interest: Angie Dickinson, the Hollywood actress famous for adult films like Dressed to Kill and Big Bad Mama. They met through mutual friends, two people from different worlds drawn to each other. Angie was bold, confident, and used to the bright lights of Hollywood. Corallo was reserved, calculating, and lived in the world of whispered deals and backroom meetings. Their relationship was never loud, never public. He preferred to keep things private, just as he did with everything in his life. In 1986, law enforcement finally caught up with him. FBI wiretaps recorded him discussing the mob's business, and it was enough to bring him down. He was convicted in the Mafia Commission trial and sentenced to 100 years in prison. The man who once controlled New York's streets spent the rest of his life behind bars. Corallo and Angie Dickinson kept their relationship quiet, but the next mob boss, he was rumored to have had a thing with one of Hollywood's biggest stars ever: Al Capone. If you've heard about this mafia boss, then you know he ruled Chicago like a king. During Prohibition, Capone built an empire on illegal alcohol, turning the Chicago outfit into one of the most feared crime syndicates in history. He had politicians in his pocket, police on his payroll, and enemies who either bowed to him or disappeared. But while his criminal life made headlines, his personal life was full of secrets, one of them being his rumored romance with Joan Crawford. Joan was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, known for her performances in adult films like Possessed. Her beauty, talent, and sharp ambition made her a legend. But in the shadows of her rise to fame, whispers linked her to Capone. Some claimed they met in secret, that he was drawn to her strength and elegance. Others dismissed it as gossip, saying Capone had no time for Hollywood distractions. The truth? No one ever confirmed, and Capone took many secrets to his grave. What wasn't a secret was his ruthless grip on Chicago. In 1929, he orchestrated the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, wiping out his rivals in a brutal display of power. But the government wasn't focused on his murders, they were focused on his money. In 1931, Capone was convicted of tax evasion. He went from a palace in Chicago to a prison cell in Alcatraz. By the time he was released, syphilis had destroyed his mind. He died in 1947, no longer the feared gangster, just a broken man lost in his own past. People still argue about whether Capone and Joan Crawford were really together, but the next crime boss had no secrets. His actress girlfriend later told the world everything. Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar had everything: money, power, and a fearsome reputation. His Medellin cartel dominated the cocaine trade, making billions while leaving a trail of violence across Colombia. By the late 1980s, he was one of the richest men in the world, his fortune so vast that rats reportedly ate millions of dollars in hidden cash. But even the most powerful men crave something more, and for Escobar, that was Virginia Vallejo. Virginia was a well-known Colombian actress and journalist, famous for erotic films like Colombia Connection. She was beautiful, intelligent, and used to the attention of powerful men. When Escobar set his sights on her, he didn't hold back. He flew her on private jets, showered her with luxuries, and made sure she never had to ask for anything. For a while, she was part of his world, enjoying the wealth that came from his bloody empire. But the dream didn't last. As the Colombian government and U.S. authorities closed in, Escobar's world began to fall apart. Virginia saw the cracks, the brutality, the fear that even his closest allies had around him. She escaped and later wrote Loving Pablo, Hating Escobar, a book that exposed his empire to the world. In 1993, a phone call sealed Escobar's fate. Authorities tracked him down to a rooftop in Medellin. Cornered and out of options, he was shot dead. The empire he built on blood and terror crumbled, leaving behind only stories of his rise and his violent fall. Pablo Escobar and Virginia Vallejo had a love story filled with danger, but the next gangster was different. He showered his Hollywood lover with diamonds instead of trouble. Sam Giancana. During his time, Sam Giancana was the mafia boss who made unbelievable things happen. He ran Chicago's underworld with an iron grip, controlled gambling operations, and had politicians in his pocket. His connections ran so deep that whispers claimed he helped John F. Kennedy win the presidency by rigging votes in Illinois. But power wasn't his only interest. He also had a taste for Hollywood, and one woman in particular caught his eye: Phyllis McGuire. Phyllis was a talented actress and singer, famous for adult films like Come Blow Your Horn. Her beauty and charm made her irresistible, and Giancana made sure she had everything she wanted. He bought her jewelry, houses, and took her on lavish trips. She enjoyed the luxury, but being involved with a mob boss meant living under constant scrutiny. The FBI followed her, reporters hounded her, and Giancana's enemies always lurked in the background. By the early 1970s, his empire was crumbling. The government was closing in, and even his old allies saw him as a liability. In 1975, he was called to testify before Congress about the Mafia's dealings with the CIA. It was a risk he couldn't escape. One night, while cooking in his basement, a gunman entered and shot him 6 times. No struggle, no warning. The man who once controlled Chicago lay dead in a pool of blood. Phyllis kept singing, but Giancana's story ended the way most mob stories do, with silence. Sam Giancana made headlines with Phyllis McGuire, but the next crime boss stayed out of the spotlight, even when dating a famous movie star. Raymond Patriarca. Everyone in New England knew who controlled the streets, but few ever saw him. Raymond Patriarca didn't need a flashy lifestyle or public displays of power. He ran his empire from a small office, dressed in simple suits, speaking in low tones that carried the weight of life and death. For over 30 years, he decided who got rich, who went broke, and who didn't wake up the next morning. But away from the world of crime, there was another side to him, one connected to Hollywood's golden girl, Dorothy Provine. Dorothy was a stunning actress, best known for adult films like The Bonnie Parker Story. She had a presence that made audiences fall in love and a spirit that set her apart. Their relationship was never loud, never public. Patriarcha kept things private, just as he did with everything else in his life. Whether it was for her safety or his own secrecy, no one could say. For decades, his control was absolute. He made and destroyed fortunes, crushed competition, and held the government at bay. But even the smartest men make mistakes. In 1984, before the court could convict him, his body gave out. A heart attack ended his rule, not a prison sentence. His empire lived on, but the man himself vanished, leaving behind stories of power, loyalty, and a love that few ever truly understood. Raymond Patriarcha kept his romance with Dorothy Provine low-key, but the next gangster's love life was filled with crime, fame, and danger. Jose El Mexicano Gacha. In the 1980s, cocaine ruled the world, and the Medellin cartel was the undisputed king. Among its most feared figures was Jose El Mexicano Gacha, a man whose brutality knew no limits. His enemies weren't just eliminated, they were made examples of, their bodies left as warnings. He was ruthless, calculating, and dangerous to the core. But even the most violent men have their distractions, and for Gacha, one of them was Maribel Guardia. Maribel was a rising star, a Mexican actress whose beauty captivated audiences in erotic films like Terror and Black Lace. She moved through the world of entertainment, unaware that the man she was involved with was one of the deadliest figures in the drug trade. While Maribel focused on her career, Gacha was expanding cartel operations into the US and Europe, making billions while leaving a trail of corpses behind him. But power in the cartel never lasts forever. In 1989, the Colombian military hunted him down. Surrounded and outgunned, he chose to fight rather than surrender. The bullets came fast, and his reign ended in a storm of gunfire. Maribel distanced herself from the chaos, never fully knowing the extent of the man she once called a lover. El Mexicano's affair with Maribel Guardia was full of drama, but the next gangster didn't just date a Hollywood star. He used her to move mob money all over the world. Bugsy Siegel. Las Vegas might be the city of flashing lights and endless fortunes, but in the beginning, it was nothing but a dusty stretch of desert. Bugsy Siegel saw something no one else did, a gambling empire waiting to be built. He convinced the mob to pour millions into the Flamingo Hotel, promising them a golden future. But Siegel was never careful with money, and when the numbers stopped adding up, his luck ran out. His life had always been fast and dangerous. In the 1930s, he co-founded Murder Inc., the Mafia's secret hit squad responsible for hundreds of assassinations. Fearless and unpredictable, he was both respected and feared, but outside of crime, he had a different kind of partner. Virginia Hill. Virginia was a stunning Hollywood actress, famous for adult films like The Senate Crime Investigations. She had more than looks. She had connections, a sharp mind, and a talent for moving money. While Siegel built his Vegas empire, she helped him launder mob funds through Swiss banks. Some say she knew more about his operations than anyone else. By 1947, the Flamingo was bleeding money, and the bosses back east had had enough. On June 20th, as Siegel sat in his Beverly Hills mansion, a gunman fired through the window. A bullet tore through his skull, ending his reign instantly. Virginia was nowhere to be found that night. The Flamingo went on to make millions, but Siegel never got to see the city he dreamed of become a reality. His empire lived on, but his story ended in blood. Bugsy Siegel and Virginia Hill were partners in love and crime, but the next mobster was different. He dated someone who made sure he stayed in the spotlight. Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano. The Mafia was built on loyalty, and no one enforced that rule harder than Sammy the Bull Gravano. He was John Gotti's right-hand man, the underboss of the Gambino crime family, and the man who made problems disappear permanently. With 19 murders under his belt, his name carried fear, but in the end, he did what no one saw coming. He turned on his own boss and shattered the underworld. His reputation was already infamous, but his relationship with Victoria Gotti gave it another twist. Victoria, the daughter of the man he would later betray, was also a Hollywood actress and reality TV star, famous for adult shows like Growing Up Gotti. Their connection added to his public image, making him a name beyond the crime world. For years, Gravano handled the Gambino family's bloodiest work, making sure no one crossed them. But when the FBI came knocking, he made a choice that sent shockwaves through the Mafia. He testified in court, sending John Gotti and more than 30 other mobsters to prison. The Mafia code of silence was broken, and Sammy walked free under witness protection. But his freedom didn't last long. By 2000, he was back in prison, this time serving a 20-year sentence. Sammy the Bull's time with Victoria Gotti put him on TV, but the next gangster had a love story straight out of Bollywood, one he turned into a real-life fairy tale. Haji Mastan. Mumbai's crime world had its share of gangsters, but Haji Mastan carried himself differently. He didn't lurk in the shadows or settle disputes with bullets. He walked with the confidence of a businessman, dressed in spotless white, speaking with authority that even the most powerful men respected. His empire was built on gold smuggling, a trade that made him one of the richest men in India during the 1960s and 1970s. But Mastan wasn't just about crime. He had a deep fascination with Bollywood, pouring his wealth into films and forming relationships with its biggest stars. Among them was Sona Mastan Mirza, a Bollywood actress known for erotic films like Adamkhor. She had a striking resemblance to Madhubala, one of India's most beloved screen icons, and that made her even more attractive to Mastan. As the years passed, Mastan stepped away from crime and reinvented himself as a political figure. He turned away from the underworld, entered politics, and founded the Dalit Muslim Suraksha Mahasangh Party, which faded away after his death in 1994. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.